Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Brazos Valley. My name is Katie Womack, and I am your worship assistant today. I come to this church because I do believe in and embrace the Universalism teachings of this religion that Reverend Christian will be preaching about today. We are a welcoming congregation, which means we celebrate and welcome all people of any sexual orientation, race, age, gender identity, ability, or belief. So whoever you are, wherever you've come from, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Honoring the value of spiritual freedom and diversity, we have no statement of doctrine. As a covenanted community, we search for truth and how it applies to ethical living. Unitarian Universalism is a faith of covenant, not creed. We want to welcome our visitors. We're very happy to have you join us for worship and hope you will continue to get to know us better and find us to be the church community you're looking for. We encourage everyone to visit our website, brazos-uu.org, and our Facebook page and group to keep up with what's going on. If you want to receive our weekly e-cast and our monthly newsletter, you can contact our administrator at admin@brazos-uu.org, which you will see in the chat box now. On the website, you can sign up to become a digital member of the community. If you want to know what it means to be a member of this church or are interested in joining, please contact our minister, Reverend Christian Schmidt, by email at minister@brazos-uu.org, which you will see in the chat box. Reverend Christian is our preacher today, and his sermon today is titled 21st Century Universalism.
Friends, today we celebrate the legacy we have inherited, one which says that all our destinies are joined, one which calls us to hope and optimism even in the face of trials and challenges. Today we honor those brave Universalists who proclaim the love of God to people used to hearing about fire and brimstone. In this time of chaos and fear, it is our legacy to preach love and compassion, peace and mercy, with both our words and our lives. May it be so.
We light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, as a beacon of hope for all who seek justice, dignity, and compassion, and in celebration of the life of truth and meaning we share together. And now our church's affirmation. We affirm love is the spirit of this church and service its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together
in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
This is a song by Mustard's Retreat. It's called Ours is a Simple Faith, and it talks a lot about universalism. Ours is a simple faith. Life is a short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day. Hope is the ground we till. Make each day what you will. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day. There is no hell to fear, no judgment day drawing near. Trust that inner voice you hear every day. And life's not a goal or race. It's about heart and faith and living a life of grace every day. Trust is an open hand, making an honest stand, rooted here in the land every day. Living the mystery, seeking the harmony here between you and me every day. Ours is a simple faith. Life is a short embrace. Heaven is in this place every day. Hope is the ground we till. Make each day what you will. Thankful for dreams fulfilled every day.
Today, our time for all ages is a really wonderful one. It's a little longer than we usually do. I want to warn you about that, but it's worth every minute. It's the story of John Murray and how he came to America. It's told through a curriculum called Spirit Play here, which is an attempt to use stories and also engage the senses through visual and tactile ways in order to really give something for everyone to take hold of. So like I said, this is a little longer than usual, but don't worry. Stay with it. It's a wonderful story. Here we go.
What could this be? It could be a big blue book. Maybe it's a big blue box. The sky is often blue. Maybe it's the sky. The ocean can be blue. I think it's the ocean. Let's see what else we have to work with. Maybe these two pieces can help us. They could go on top of each other like this. Let's see. Maybe they go better end to end. Maybe they can work like this. I think that will help. These could be land, a shore. One here, one here. In between these two shores is water. So much water. There's a story told about a boy who was born on one of these shores, who when he became a man took the long journey to the other shore. This boy's name is John Murray, and he lived in England into the 1700s. As a boy, John Murray dreaded Sundays. His family, led by a stern father, rose at dawn each Sunday to spend the whole day praying and attending church. After church, John's father would quiz him on the sermon. If John couldn't answer every question, his father would hit him. John's parents believed in the Calvinist idea of God, that God decided whether a person would go to heaven or hell before a person was even born, and a person could do nothing to change this. Furthermore, only a few certain people were chosen to go to heaven. People thought that if you attended church a lot, and if you worked very hard, and if you were very, very good, and if you made a good living, it could mean that God had chosen you for heaven. And that was why John's father was so strict. John tried to please his father. At the age of 6, he could read entire chapters of the Bible. He developed a talent for speaking, and, as a teenager, he was often asked to preach at nearby churches. One day, after John grew up and got married, he heard that in London, a small group of people called Universalists were preaching ideas about God that were very different from the Calvinists. "John," said his wife Eliza one day, "who are these Universalists?" "I don't know," he answered, "but I hear they're evil and dangerous people." "What do they believe?" asked Eliza. "From what I hear, they believe some crazy idea that, well, every person will go to heaven because God is so good," said John. "To tell the truth, John," said Eliza, "sometimes I wonder myself why a truly good God would want millions of humans to go to hell through no fault of their own. Besides, John, is anyone really completely good?" After much thought, John and Eliza joined the Universalists, and John began to preach. He rode around from city to city, teaching people how to love each other and love God. John traveled around letting people know that God loved them and that God loved all people, and that God wasn't angry and wasn't going to punish them. But people couldn't always believe John. They would get so angry at him that they would tell him to leave their towns. But John knew his message of a loving God was reaching some people, so he continued. Then suddenly everything changed. His son died, and Eliza became sick. John spent all their money and borrowed more to save her, but she died also. He stopped preaching. He was too sad, and people didn't like hearing that God loved them. John decided he wasn't going to preach anymore. He said he was going to leave his country and take the long journey to the wilderness in America. John got a job on a boat which was sailing for America. It was a long trip. Meanwhile, there was a man in America named Potter. Potter was a farmer who owned a lot of land. Potter had been having the strangest dreams. He began thinking that God was talking to him in his dreams. Mr. Potter had a dream in which God told him that he needed to build a church building on his land near the ocean, and that God would send a preacher who would come and preach from the pulpit. God also told Mr. Potter that the preacher would preach a wonderful message of love that would change people's hearts. Potter did as he was told in the dream. He built a church building, and then he waited. I wonder if the minister will ever come. I wonder who that minister is. The boat in which John Murray was sailing finally made it to America, but the water got shallow and the boat got stuck just offshore. They had been traveling for a long time and had begun to run out of food. So the captain of the ship asked John to go ashore and buy some food to bring back to the boat. John came to shore. And where was he? He was on Mr. Potter's land, and he ran into Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter met John saying the strangest thing. He said, "Today, when I saw your ship in the bay, a voice inside me seemed to say, 'There, Potter, on that ship may be the preacher you have so long expecting, who will teach about a loving God who saves all people, not a chosen few.'" John didn't know about Mr. Potter's dream, that he was to build a chapel and that a preacher would come and preach God's love. John said quickly, "I am not a preacher." "But," said Thomas Potter, leaning forward, "can you say you've never preached?" "I have preached," answered John slowly, "and I believe as you do in a loving God." "I knew it, shouted Thomas. "You are the preacher for whom I have waited for so long. You've got to preach in my church on Sunday." "No," replied John firmly. "I never want to preach again. Tomorrow, as soon as the wind changes, I will be on my way." After John went to bed, he couldn't sleep. He thought to himself as he tossed and turned, "I just wanted to get away from everything. If I preach Universalism, I know there will be trouble. Folks here in America mostly have Calvinist views. Just like in England, why start trouble for myself in this new country? But Thomas Potter has such faith in me, and he's so kind. Oh, I wish I knew what to do." By Saturday night, the wind still had not changed, and John finally agreed to preach the next morning. Thomas Potter was overjoyed. He grabbed his coat and hat and ran for the door. "I'm going to spread the word to all the neighbors. They can expect a sermon such as they have never heard before." That Sunday morning, September 30th, 1770, John Murray climbed into the pulpit and told the people there to go out and give a glimpse of God's love. Give them not hell, but hope. John didn't stay with Mr. Potter, but he did stay in America, and he did start preaching again. He founded many churches, devoting to spreading the message of love. I wonder if you have ever heard or seen any of this before. I wonder what was your favorite part of the story. I wonder what was the most important part of the story. I wonder where you might be in this story. I wonder if John was ever scared that people wouldn't like what he was telling them. I wonder if Mr. Potter ever worried that a preacher would never come. I wonder if you have ever had a dream like Mr. Potter's. I wonder what other ways God speaks to people. I wonder if Mr. Potter was happy or disappointed when the preacher finally came. I wonder if this lesson reminds you of any of our Unitarian Universalist promises. I wonder where the spirit of love and mystery could be in this story.
Thank you all for your attention and for that wonderful telling of the story of John Murray coming to America. We'll circle back to it in a few minutes in part of the sermon. For now, though, I want to invite all of us to take a moment to prepare ourselves for a time of prayer and meditation and sharing. So get comfortable in your seats or wherever you are. Perhaps take a deep breath. Release the tension in your shoulders or your back. Get comfortable as best works for you. I share with you today a prayer from the Reverend Sarah Eileen Lawal, seeking that which unites us. She writes, Spirit of life and love, in this time of uncertainty, of fear and angst, our nation holds its collective breath. In this time when rhetoric blusters about and words are used as weapons, our nation clenches its fists, tightens its shoulders, eyes squeeze shut. Some are preparing for a fight. May we remember we are a people of resilience. We have faced uncertainty before. We have weathered storms. We have been consumed by flames. We have risen like the phoenix from the ashes, and we will again, we the people. May we remember our shared humanity, our universal kinship, our interdependence, as we unclench our fists and breathe together, breathing in love, breathing out peace. May we recognize the spark of the divine inside all of us, even those we're not quite sure about. In this time of uncertainty, we remember the good will go on as we work to move forward together, we, the people, seeking that which unites us, with our arms reaching out wide for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. May love prevail. In the name of all that is holy, we pray. Amen. I want to lift up several things for our joys and concerns and invite you now to start writing in the chat box with your individual joys and concerns as well. I think of those both here in our gathering and all over the world preparing for Yom Kippur, which starts this evening. I think too of those protesting, angry at court decisions over the death of Breonna Taylor, those who have sought sanctuary in our sister church in Louisville as police crack down on protests. I want to lift up all the joys and concerns from all the members of our community too, all the aches and heartaches, all the birthdays and wonderful celebrations going on. So please feel free to write in the chat box now and share with us what's going on with you.
If we were having worship service in person, this is the time when we would pass the basket. This church shares the proceeds of the offering plate donation every week to support important nonprofit organizations with which we work. We are proud to support UU the Vote for September and October. Many of us are working on this grassroots effort to engage and inform voters who need to reclaim their voting power. Remember, your vote is your voice and your power. If you wish to make an offering, you can mail your check, or for your convenience, you can donate online. On our homepage at brazos-uu.org, or you can find our mailing address at the bottom and the top, you will see Donate Here tab to click to see donation options. You will see how to donate in the chat box now. Just go to www.brazos-uu.org, donate here. May each of us look into our hearts, how much love, how much generosity, how much faith, how much gratitude, how much hope is there. We give thanks for these gifts which we have given, for those we receive, and for each other.
Reading today comes from the Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd. It's called Universalism in Practice, written several years ago in the wake of events in Ferguson, Missouri. She writes this: Did Michael Brown steal the cigars from the convenience store in Ferguson that day in August? National headlines wrap themselves around that question as if the answer to it changed anything at all, including the death and suffering and the loss. I thought then, and I think now, what the hell does it matter in this grand tragedy of national and international pain if the boy stole the stars? Unitarian Universalists are the inheritors of a dual heretical tradition born from the radical branches of Protestant Christianity. We have taken our foundational doctrines in all sorts of innovative directions over the centuries, but our theological heritage remains the same. Unitarianism, one God, not three, not mediated or modified by Jesus or any other prophet, but one God. And Universalism, the unyielding belief that each and every person is endowed with an original blessing that calls them and claims them regardless of circumstance or even of worthiness. Every single person. Inherently endowed with worth and dignity, original blessing for every single person, with no categorical exclusions in the least. We are so far removed from the theological underpinnings of those founding days that it can be difficult to interpret our heritage. But if each and every one is endowed with inherent worth and dignity, then humankind cannot be categorized, and thus whole groups of humankind cannot be dismissed. It's not just one kind of person or one category of persons who are offered every blessing of life and every dignity. It's everyone. Whether you deserve it or not, whether you stole the cigars or not, does not matter. By focusing our national discourse on Michael Brown's perceived culpability or lack thereof, we seem to be asking as a nation if he did or did not deserve to die that day. In this nation, we focus not only on whether or not Michael Brown was guilty, but whether or not he was the right kind of young black man. Was he the kind of young black man who deserved to walk free, or was he the kind of young black man that ultimately got what he deserved? In a parallel mode, we ask if a young woman raped on her college campus was the right kind of young woman. Was she wearing fishnets and heels? Did she get drunk at the party? Did she lead him on, we ask, as if to determine once and for all into which category we can sort the beaten and injured and oppressed. Are you the right kind of woman, the right kind of immigrant, the right kind of American, the right kind of young black man? Because if you are not, our culture is ready to wash our hands of you. And that is an unstated but deeply lived doctrine of hell on earth. It runs contrary to every thread of the universalism at our core, a tradition that calls us to universally, categorically, love the hell out of the world. So you do not have to be a good enough young black man to not get shot on the street. You do not have to be the right kind of immigrant to deserve basic health care when you are dying. You do not have to be the right kind of girl to not be raped. You do not have to be good enough to deserve basic human rights. You do not have to earn safety. We are inherently enough. We do not have to prove it. And so ends.
This is a song about that. This is Holy Now by Peter Mayer. When I was a boy each week, on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest, and he would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time that Moses spoke the sea into, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad that miracles don't happen still, but now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, barely wet my fingertips, now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second rate hand me down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Read a questioning child's face and say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come and say it's not a sacrament. I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood and I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. 'Cause everything is holy now. Used to be a world half there, heaven's second rate hand me down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
Joe, thank you so much. In fact, friends, before I start my sermon, I want to take a moment to honor Joe Daigle. He spent 4 years as our artist in residence, providing amazing music leadership, including the sort of thing you just heard. And he's now stepping off of staff in order to put more time towards his other work and his family. And in this time of pandemic, I think we can all understand that. The very good news is that, of course, he's not leaving us, just his staff role. So we'll still see him in our community and our lives for a long time to come, and hopefully hear a little music, not as much as we've heard, I'm sure, but I've only worked with him for 6 weeks, but it's been a productive and collaborative relationship, and I'll miss his presence on our staff. I wanted to try something in this virtual era of church, and I hope it'll work. I was going to ask us all to unmute and just give Joe an ovation. It might sound terrible with the sound, I don't know, but I want to try. So unmute yourselves. I implore you. He's certainly worthy of it. Yay! Show your video too. Rob. And it's sermon time. We've had some really good explanations already this morning of universalism from our Time for All Ages, from Nancy MacDonald Ladd in our reading, from our prayer today, very much universalist in how it spoke. I want to talk about how hard a thing universalism can be. And I say that very much as a committed universalist. So I'm going to talk about it historically, and as we go through the sermon, I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means to be universalist today, because I think that's changed quite a bit over the last 200 years. So historically, of course, universalism, the name came from the doctrine of universal salvation, the notion that all people would ultimately be reconciled or saved, to put it another way, back to the divine. And to put that a different way, that means that universalists believe or believed that you and me and Hitler and serial killers and everyone, all the best and worst people you know, will be going to heaven, they thought, or whatever's next after this life, if there's anything. Universalism is a bold assertion that everyone, every single one of us, is worthy and valuable, redeemable, no matter what awful things we do or have done, no matter who we are. So historically, Universalists were quite concerned about the eternal implications of this doctrine. And today, I think we worry more about what it means for this world, right here, right now. To speak in the words of the song, everything is holy now. To put it in more contemporary terms, you do not have to be good enough to not be shot in your own house or to deserve decent health care. You don't have to be good enough to not starve. And this stands in stark contrast to the message we hear sometimes directly, but more often implicitly, the message that if you are good enough or smart enough or lucky enough or something enough, then you can get what you want. Because that's the so-called American dream. If I just work hard enough and a few things work out, I'll have everything. And we know that this is simply not the case for everyone in our society. We say that Black lives matter, but until they do matter, all lives can't truly matter. We lift up our first principle. We affirm the dignity and worth of all people, and we affirm that because we know that not all people act that way right now. How can we do that if the reality is our society simply doesn't affirm all lives? Not yet. Well, the answer lies in our heritage and our commitment to making that statement true, even if it isn't yet. So the reason we're talking about this today, this month, this week indeed, is that 250 years ago this week, John Murray preached his first sermon in America. You heard about it in our Time for All Ages, and it's true. He was run aground off the coast of New Jersey and had to be convinced to preach. He later became known as the father of American Universalism, but as our story said, he probably never should have been here. He was in many ways a strange figure to be the banner holder for Universalism. He had early in his adult life in England been staunchly anti-Universalist. He had been raised as a Calvinist until a preacher named James Relly and a woman named we only know as Eliza converted him. But Murray's life was far from smooth after that. As we heard, he had fled to America after his wife and young son died. He had spent time in a debtor's prison in England after going broke trying to care for them. And yes, his ship to America ran aground just off the coast of New Jersey. So, as unlikely as it seems, all of that did happen. And so he preached there, and then again and again and again, and eventually helped found Universalist churches in many places, many of them in New England, especially in and around Boston. And so today I talk about that Universalist heritage and what it might mean for us in the 21st century. And I want to give some more definitions, give a little more context. Universalism is called that because of the position those people took, universal salvation. They felt, unlike the Calvinists of their time, that a loving God would eventually reconcile all creation and save everyone, not just whoever might be deserving. To put it in slightly more modern language, everyone goes to heaven, they said. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, this was not a popular position. This was the time of fire and brimstone, of sinners in the hand of an angry God sort of theology that was prevalent across much of America in that period. The Universalists, though they agreed with some parts of that, for instance, they did not think that people on the whole were particularly good, but they stood starkly opposed to the notion that God would punish anyone eternally in hell. They were quite successful. They became a large and influential group in America in the mid to late 1800s, by one report numbering 1 out of 6 people in the US at one point. But they were also a victim of their own success. Their position on universal salvation gradually became the default among much of what we know as the main line, that is, Congregationalists and Methodists, Lutherans, even many Baptists. Universalist numbers gradually declined over the next few decades, and by the 1950s, they were few in number and struggling, which was part of the reason for the consolidation with the Unitarians in 1961, something that had been talked about for many years. The story of Universalism changes dramatically at that point. In some ways, they were swallowed up by the greater number of the Unitarians. But again, even if their numbers were not great, their ideas certainly were. I argue that much of our modern UU theology is framed and informed by Universalist ideas. Because modern Universalist thought is alive and well in many traditions, including our own, where it has evolved and morphed but is still very much with us. Our first principle is distinctly Universalist. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. Now, today, many Unitarian Universalists don't know what happens after we die, if anything. We may not think much of anything does. Universalism still has a message for us that we are all in this together and that there is at least the potential for goodness within us. Now, this is not a message that historical Universalists would have directly understood, perhaps, but it builds upon what they knew. They did think that all of us would eventually see the same fate. Now, I say eventually because there was considerable debate about how universal salvation worked among these Universalists, and I get to talk about my favorite 19th century theological squabble just briefly. There was a fight in the mid-1800s about how universal salvation worked. Yes, they thought eventually everyone would be reconciled with God, but there was considerable disagreement about how that happened. There was a group that came to be known as ultra-universalists, I guess UUs, ultra-universalists, who felt that in the instant you die, you would be welcomed into heaven. All would be forgiven. There was another group called restorationists that thought it was not quite that easy or simple, that you might have to spend some time after death focusing on what you did wrong, how you could be better, improving yourself so that you could be ready for heaven. And I confess that my own position seems like this makes a lot of sense. I feel like one life is probably not enough for many of us to get everything right. We might need a little extra time. Now, eventually, these two sides got back together. They were in conversation for many years. And finally, the debate died down. But whether you think that either of those groups is right or that the argument matters at all, I think it does matter that we acknowledge our interconnectedness, that our fates are inescapably intertwined. My friend and colleague, the Reverend Teresa Inés Soto, puts it this way: all of us need all of us to survive. Our society often gives us a very different view, that the strongest or the most powerful, the most privileged, the richest are fine and don't need anything. And others are lucky to have anything at all. But we know how deeply interconnected our lives are, even around the globe. This time of pandemic has made it interesting to me what's an essential job and what's not. Suddenly, food service, one of the most poorly paid, most difficult jobs in our economy, is deemed essential in ways that it perhaps never was before, even though it always has been. Our economic systems rely on people at all strata all over the world. Our climate, our very continued existence on this world, is dependent not just on choices you or I make, but the choices that corporations and nations and people we will never meet in faraway places are making and have been making for decades and centuries. Universalism today calls us not just to recognize those interconnections, though that's a start, nor even to fix the problems, though that's important. Climate change will take all of us doing all we can just to mitigate the worst of it at this point. Those two things would be a lot to ask of anyone, but no, Universalism asks even more. It asks us further to fix our relationships with all people and with the world. Because if our fates are joined, then we need to be in good relationship. So if you are the type to believe in an afterlife, then Universalism puts it this way: we're all going to be in heaven together forever. We might as well start learning to get along now. Another famous Universalist preacher put it a different way. Hosea Ballou, riding down the road with a Baptist friend of his, had a conversation. As they were riding their horses, the Baptist asked him, if I didn't believe I would be punished eventually for it, what would stop me from just knocking you over, stealing your horse, and moving on? Ballou said to him, if you were a Universalist, the notion would never even occur to you. That's the hardest thing about it. It means we have to be ready to fix relationships across political, economic, racial, and other divides. And not by making some quick compromise or avoiding certain subjects we don't want to talk about with someone we disagree, or by being less than we are. It doesn't mean hiding anything. No, it means bringing everything we are to a relationship, not necessarily agreeing, but agreeing to love anyway. And I don't know exactly what this looks like. I found myself struggling to picture it. How do we love people who are committed to things that we absolutely abhor? How do we go about changing that? And not merely in a way that says we're right and they're wrong, but in a way that struggles to find a solution that makes sense for all people. I don't know yet what it looks like, but I know that we have to do it. And so, friends, the legacy of Universalism is alive and well, and it informs all we do and think. May we be brave and wise enough to remember that all of us need all of us. And may we move forward in love and compassion in these difficult times.
Lots of thoughts about right and wrong. Lots of words we love to lift in song. Many things we love to see. Many ways we think the world should be. Go out and do something. Nothing changes if we do nothing. Second chance may not be coming. Take the stance, then go out there and do something. While we nap, the nightmares rage, and our dreams get lost on the crowded stage. We need to wake up with more than voices, alive with our vision, but live in our choices. Go out and do something. Nothing changes if we do nothing. A second chance may not be coming. So take a stance and go out there. Go out and do something. Nothing changes if we do nothing. A second chance may not be coming. So take a stance and go out there and do something.
Now please join me in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we gather together again. Thank you.
From the proud history of our church and the tradition we inherit, we turn to the future. We bring the universalism we have learned and loved and bring it into the 21st century. We bring the legacy of reaching out to people, of agreeing and disagreeing, but loving nevertheless. May we be strong enough to carry on this tradition for many years to come. Our worship is ended and our service begins.